I've been trying to get over COVID, and since I couldn't get in the shop, I did what any sensible person does. Online shopping. I picked up the Miles track saw jig. Now I have some home improvement projects coming up, and having a track saw would be pretty handy. Y'all know that I don't use a circular saw very often, but a track saw is pretty good to have, and I'm gonna pick one up eventually. In the meantime, let's compare the Miles Craft jig to the most popular track saws on the market. The Festool TS55 FEQ, with the 55-inch guide rail, it's about $700. You wanna buy an extra guide rail? That's another $150. If you want the guide rail clamps, well, you gotta buy those separately, that's another $50. I use the saw and it is a dream to use. Highly recommended if you got the cash. The Makita SP6000J, that's an awful name. It'll cost you about $500, and that's with the 55-inch guide rail, just like the Festool. An extra guide rail is another $100. You want the clamps, buy those separately, you're spending another 40 to 50 bucks. The Bosch GK213 ABC. I'll put it down there. Bosch, man, Bosch. Whew. I was not prepared for the price point of this saw. Wow, it's expensive. Right now it's about $640 just for the saw alone. You gotta buy the guide rail separately, that's another $150. You gotta buy the clamps, if you want clamps, that's another $70, $80. Whew, that's a pricey tool. Real quick, some of the more common brands out there that are a little bit cheaper. The DeWalt with the track rail, you're looking at $540. The Milwaukee is more like $510. They're about comparable. You can also get a Craig version of this that has the saw and the guide rails, and that's a little bit over $300. Now that we know the competition, let's crack this open. I'm gonna walk through this, show you the parts, we're gonna test it, I'm gonna use it, and then I can tell you my honest feedback on something like this. Oh, and this isn't sponsored. I don't know Miles Craft whatsoever. As a base plate for your circular saw, it says it holds multiple types of saws. So I don't know, I only have one type, so that's what I gotta go with. It comes with the clamp, so I don't have to buy those separately. And it has two aluminum tracks. They are 27.5 inches long, so you put them together, you got 55 inches right there. The tracks connect together with these little connector things. We pop the end cap on, slide these in, tighten it down. The base plate is aluminum. There's a couple plastic pieces, not very many. And then this is a guide that fits on this really thin guide rail. And that's what makes it slide back and forth. It comes with optional bushings that adjust the tension. So you just put a screw through the back plate, screw on the bushing. Put the base plate onto the track, push it so that you're applying pressure towards the front, and then screw the bushing towards the back. The tighter you screw it to the back edge, the more tension you're applying. This slides really smooth. There's no play in this at all. I know these guides are optional, but I'm definitely gonna keep them on and try it with those first. And then if I don't like them, I can always take them off. The kit comes with two of these clamps. They slide into the bottom of the track. The most common complaint I've seen for this whole thing was this part right here snapping off. But I'm guessing that's the reason why they started putting this label on here. Do not use excessive force when clamping. This seems fairly robust to me. I haven't tried it yet, but also you shouldn't have to apply a whole lot of clamping pressure to this. The track already has these non-skid pads, so whenever you put this down on your work surface, it can slide around. It doesn't slide super easy, but it can slide. One of these clamps with just a little bit of pressure should lock this down in place, so I don't see why you'd want to clamp this really hard. Also, if you did that, you'd probably bend the track, I would imagine. The jig's supposed to hold all kinds of different circular saws. I can only test mine, so I can't really speak to every brand out there. But you put the saw in here, and you can slide this plastic piece up against it to hold it in place, and then you've got these adjustable clamps that will then clamp your saw onto the base panel. For calibration, you'll use this. This little guide goes up against the edge of your workpiece. Then the base plate fits on top of that. Then you can put your saw on the base plate and make sure that you get the blade lined up where it's supposed to be at. Lock it all down. Once you get your saw clamped in place, I don't really see a reason why you'd have to redo this step unless something comes loose or you take your saw off completely. Everything's assembled, so let's test it out. And in doing so, I'm gonna have to cut through this red strip. There's like a zero clearance plastic strip that's on each one of these that you have to cut through. So let's do some tests. Wow, that's a really sharp cut. Now this is MDF, I didn't expect any sort of tear out, and I don't have any. I have a sharp edge on the bottom, and the top looks really clean. So far so good. Now let's test repeatability. I'm gonna take both tracks, I'm gonna put them together, I'm gonna draw some lines on this MDF, and we're gonna make a bunch of cuts over and over again. We're gonna see, does it stay straight, especially with those clamps on the saw. It's been a few weeks now, and I put it through its paces as much as I could in a couple weeks, which I think was a decent amount. Now here's my impressions of this. It's really good. It glides so smooth over the tracks. Even when you put both of them together, man, it is super smooth, and I like that one a whole lot. I did encounter, though, one major issue. Now there is a solution to it, but it's an issue. It's a regular circular saw. That means I'm used to just putting it into the case with it, all the way down, not raised up. What I found is I was doing that with it mounted on the base, and well, it comes uncalibrated that way, and that was a big problem. So much so that I realized after a couple cuts, it wasn't cutting as smooth, it was actually kind of sticking, and then it cut and hit the aluminum. That's because these clamps can only clamp it so tight. Now what I was doing was making my cut, and then taking my saw and just setting it down like normal, right? And I know you don't keep it all the way down. You only want to cut it, maybe 1/8 of an inch or whatever deeper than your material. But still, by doing that, this saw base is down further than the actual aluminum base. So I'd set it down like this. It looks fine. It's not fine. And doing that, it slowly loosens up these clamps and knocks it out of calibration. What I had to do is, on the bottom, you have these strips here, the zero clearance strip. You could peel that off and then just take it, push it a little further, stick it back on, and then you're fine after that. After I learned that lesson, I started making my cuts and then ensuring that I raise the saw up so that it's completely elevated, then set it down on my workbench. And after doing it that way, I made cut after cut after cut, and it was absolutely fine. It worked great. Now there are a couple downsides with this system. One, it doesn't come with a saw. You gotta bring your own with that one. Two, you are reliant on trying to calibrate it, and you probably wanna check that over and over again, randomly compared to just having a regular track saw. Something else is you can't do plunge cuts with this one, okay? So unlike something like the Festool where you can just and then go, you gotta start further out and then make your cuts the regular way. It also has zero dust collection, and well, circular saws can be really messy. Compare that to some of these other saws that are actually track saws, much better dust collection, that could be a big deal to you. Overall, I'd say $100. That's a pretty good buy I think it's worth it. That's kind of up to you to decide, depending on what you do in your shop, how you work. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you to the Super 8 community over on Patreon for supporting me, allowing me to make videos like this, and tune in again to get in your shop and build something awesome.